Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squad for boxing news and views from around the internet. This weekend's fight between Derek Chisora and Senad Gashi shapes as a very important one for Chisora because he needs to prove he's got something left in the tank if he wants to be considered for bigger fights. Recently, Chisora was knocked out in pretty brutal fashion by Dillian Whyte in what was a pretty competitive fight in which he was winning until the stoppage in the 11th round, but ultimately, he did lose that fight and in brutal fashion. So this is his bounce back fight. He needs to prove he's got something in the tank to get in the conversation for fights with Alexander Usyk, because he says that is what he wants next, and I'll get to that. And also, David Haye, his manager slash promoter, has confirmed that Chisora is likely to call out Anthony Joshua if he beats Senad Gashi this weekend. Pretty unlikely in my view that he is really in consideration for that fight, but he does have to win nonetheless, and sort of to keep himself at least on the periphery of that fight. But the win is more important for his career in general, just to keep going, to get those paydays that he is seeking, because Derek Chisora is a pretty mercenary sort of character. He is after a decent paycheck if he can get it, if and when, and possibly after this fight with Senad Gashi, reprising that possible fight with Joseph Parker mid-year, somewhere around July, potentially on the Dillian Whyte undercard of the July 13th pay-per-view. That looks like a strong possibility. So heading into that fight, should it be made, he's got to come off a win here, and if he goes life and death with Senad Gashi to any extent, doesn't look good, well, that's not going to be good for his stock in the division, and fans will probably sort of not look too favourably at a Parker fight, because the sort of pendulum would swing all the way to Joseph Parker. As it is, Parker for many fans would be a hot favourite against Derek Chisora, so he needs to look good against Gashi, come through it and really sort of dominate and potentially get an emphatic stoppage, just as Carlos Takam was able to do in his recent fight with Gashi. But that fight with Takam, it wasn't all Takam's way, because he looked dreadful in the opening rounds as Gashi was on his bike and really wheeling Takam around the ring, making him look all of his 38 years old. So there's the potential here, if Gashi can replicate some of that style, some of the movement that he showed Carlos Takam, that he could make a Derek Chisora look rather ordinary. And we have seen that before with Chisora. Against Ajit Kabiyal back in 2017, Kabiyal used movement and really had Chisora all at sea, and Kabiyal ended up beating Chisora to retain his EBU title. So there is some risk with this fight that maybe Chisora still gets the win, but he could end up looking decidedly average in spots. But first of all, we'll go to the press conference, and then I want to get back to a couple of other things. So here is a little montage of the final press conference, starting with Senad Gashi and then on to Derek Chisora. So Gashi is explaining here this first piece about the last time that he was in the UK fighting Carlos Takam. He was asked about, the short notice for that fight, which Eddie Hearn had said was 7 days. So Gashi is responding saying, no, it was actually less than that.
Thanks to Eddie Hearn's Matchroom Boxing and all the people around that make this possible. Second of all, I just had 3 days, not 7 days. And but I had to grab the chance, because it's a great opportunity to box in London against one of the best in the world. And I had nothing to lose. And I know I'm a warrior, and I make every fight a war. I definitely think I can win against Derek Chisora, and I'm looking forward for other fights. I visualized this fight many times in my head. I fought in my head again 10 times against Chisora. 9 times I won. 1 time I got disqualified.
Can I ask you, Senad, what did you get disqualified for?
I beat too hard when he was on the ground.
Okay, fair enough.
02 brings loads of great memories, disappointments and stuff like that. But, it's part of boxing. 1 minute you're jumping up on the ropes, next minute you're laying under the ropes. So this fight is a great fight for me. I'm excited. Give a shout out for making it happen. To you, Eddie, David, and Adam Smith right there, the man. So I'm just excited for this fight. I'm looking forward to this fight. And new coach, new skills. It's gonna be amazing. Oh yeah, man, I'm motivated. I don't travel like 3 hours on the train every 4 days because I'm not motivated. I want to fight. You know, I always say that I love fighting. You know, if he comes to fight, man, we'll fight. I don't mind. Yeah, you know, big fights available. I think they got the big four at the top, you know, but really and truly, the big four at the top don't want to fight each other. So what can you say? So us at the bottom of the scrap will just take them.
Derek Chisora ending that little montage from the final press conference. Interestingly for me, having watched that press conference and the sort of comments around him being brought in at short notice for the Takam fight, now having a longer preparation, and given he was able, for the first 3 or 4 rounds, able to drag Carlos Takam around the ring, if indeed he is fitter, he's sort of fighting shape now, maybe he could do something similar, replicate it again, to try tire out Derek Chisora, because the movement has been a problem for Chisora before. But also, you know, in that fight with Dillian Whyte, Whyte was prepared to give up some rounds. You know, he was working off the back foot, giving Chisora some movement, trying to work at distance for the most part. You know, the old exchange and that sort of thing. But he was prepared to give away rounds. And as he sort of said with that fight, he knew the knockout would come. Even though he had Chisora in trouble early on in that fight, he didn't sort of jump on him. And that fight went, the 11th round when it ended. But he was able to sort of tire Chisora out, who was stalking for the whole night, looking for Whyte. And maybe we could see that again. Looking at the potential style matchup, Gashi, instead of just going for a complete sort of, you know, slugfest, which he has been prone to do in his career, you know, he's a bit of a banger. Before he fought Tom Schwartz, in which he lost that fight by disqualification, he was all knockouts, but it was pretty low-tier opposition. And then when he fought Takam, we saw something a bit different from Senad Gashi that we didn't really see in previous fights, which was he was trying to use movement, and he'd obviously seen the Chisora fight with Carlos Takam and Takam gassing, but he couldn't maintain it. So I guess that's the open question. If he does decide to get on his bike here against Derek Chisora, is he fit enough to maintain that for, over 10 rounds, 12 rounds, that sort of thing? Is he able to sap Derek Chisora's strength to the point where he can take advantage and maybe land something telling to get him out of there? It's a big question, and it's a big if, because Senad Gashi, to me, the way that he's sort of shaping up, it's the second time that he's been brought in here, he's kind of reminding me of Dave Allen 2.0. They've been putting a bit more time and effort into Allen of late, trying to really build him the right way now instead of just throwing him into all these different fights at short notice and filling a gap. For me, Gashi seems to be that new filler, that they know that when he comes to fight, there's going to be some action in the fight. He will let his hands go. He will come to fight. He's not going to just lay down. He's going to give it his all, whether that's, obviously against Takam. He ran for a few rounds before planting his feet and trading with Takam and came off second best. But in those few rounds where the fight did catch fire, it was entertaining stuff, and I bet Eddie Hearn is looking to for that a continuation of that against Derek Chisora, but still thinking Chisora probably comes through that, because Eddie Hearn probably does have designs on having Chisora on the Dillian Whyte undercard in July, potentially against Joseph Parker. That seems to be the logical option here. But Senad Gashi, I think he's a bit of an enigma himself, because he is, really just a bit of a brawler. But then, we saw something different in that Takam fight. Maybe we will see it again. And if he is truly fitted this time, now that he's had some time, a proper camp for this fight, maybe he'll have more success in trying to implement the strategy that he was trying to do in that Takam fight. It's hard to say. But, Chisora, if he does have anything about him, he is going to get through this fight, and he needs to look impressive. He now has a new trainer in Dave Caldwell. He's linked up with him. He's left on Charles, and some people were a little bit surprised by that, because obviously Chisora and Charles, a long relationship. I guess the question is, as Senad Gashi has pointed out, see here on screen, it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. This is from Gashi. This was a Matchroom press release regarding the fight. So Senad Gashi says Derek Chisora doesn't have a boxing brain and has questioned whether the 35-year-old's new trainer Dave Caldwell will have any impact on their clash at the O2 in London on April 20. The Spain-based German heads into the showdown with War Chisora holding a record of 17 wins, yada yada yada. Get to the quotes. Derek Chisora is an old dog, and it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. Derek is a very experienced guy. He doesn't have a boxing brain, but his toughness and experience makes up for that. What I will say is he looks like he's in the best shape of his life. We are two very different fighters, but what we both share is lots of heart. We are both warriors deep down, and I predict this will be a fight that people will talk about for a very long time. He calls himself War Chisora, and it's a war he's going to get. People will love this fight. Gashi travelled to the UK. Okay, that's the Carlos Takam fight I was talking about. I had just 3 days notice for my fight with Takam. If I'd have had a full training camp, I am confident I would have beaten him. I was fighting from instinct and my stamina wasn't there. In the end, I gassed out, and you all saw what happened. I came to fight without a coach, and I decided my strategy 20 minutes before the fight started. I didn't know that. It's quite interesting. I've had a full training camp this time, and I've done my homework. I'm prepared and ready to get the win. I watch the round white KO Chisora every day. I know that I'm able to give any fighter on the planet a hard night, and I'll show everyone the real Senad Gashi on April 20. And I'm sure he will give a good account of himself, and he'll come to fight, but I do think he's going to come off second best here. But, coming back to that sort of, Dave Allen 2.0 comment, kind of seems like this. It comes in at short notice, didn't have a game plan until 20 minutes before the fight. Let's face it. Guys like Chisora and guys like Gashi, Eddie Hearn, with the number of cards that he now has, because, there's the DAZN deal in the United States through his Matchroom USA, offshoot, and all the cards that he has in the United Kingdom, because some of those cards are on DAZN, and, there's a whole slew of cards here that he has to fill. And heavyweights are very popular fighters on cards. He needs guys like Gashi. He needs guys like Chisora. These two, albeit they're at different levels, they come to fight, they put on a good performance, a good show as it were. It's entertaining. So these are the sort of guys that are always going to find a place on a bill somewhere. And Gashi, he could end up sort of going on, these other offshoot cards that, Italy or Germany or wherever Matchroom ends up having different cards through these new offices it's been opening up. But someone like Chisora should beat Gashi relatively handily enough. But if Gashi does have that stamina under his belt now, as he says he does, maybe he will be able to make him look a little bit ordinary, and that certainly will not be good for Chisora. Obviously, with the new coach and Dave Caldwell, it's a second fight under David Hay. He's going to be in good shape. Hay always manages to have his fighters whipped into tremendous condition. But that doesn't guarantee you a win, as we saw in the fight with Dillian Whyte. And he's got a lot of miles on the clock now, Derek Chisora, so who knows, maybe Senad Gashi, if everything goes his way, could spring an upset, but I'm not expecting it, but you never know. It is heavyweight boxing, but I fully expect Chisora to come through this, and for his sake, he needs to put on a good performance. Even if it is a war with Gashi, he needs to make sure that he's the one that is really coming off with the eye-catching work, putting Gashi under huge pressure, landing the shots of note, the eye-catching work. Otherwise, if he's going life and death with Gashi, it might spell a bit of disaster for his career and future opportunities. And actually, just on that, so this is another one from Matchroom. I don't mind having some of that, talking about a potential Usyk clash. And I guess, Derek Chisora and Alexander Usyk, could that really happen? If Alexander Usyk, if he has to have another interim fight, maybe before he faces an Anthony Joshua, for example, because it's likely he will become the WBO mandatory, I guess it's possible. But he is very complimentary of Alexander Usyk in this article, that Usyk will be a nightmare for everybody. The moment he puts his weight on, he'll be a nightmare. He has the punching power and the boxing skills. His movement will kill most heavyweights. I think to win with that guy, you might have to foul him a little bit, a couple of low blows. And actually, being rough and ready with Usyk might be a good strategy against him. But if Derek Chisora ever faces Alexander Usyk, I would back Usyk in a heartbeat. The movement wouldn't, we've seen Chisora in fights where movement, he's not exactly totally comfortable with, and he doesn't have a good strategy. He wants to bring you into his wheelhouse and have you trying to, up close in the pocket, trying to trade with him, because he is good in that situation. He loves laying on those ropes and counter-punching. We saw it against Carlos Takam. We've seen it in other fights with Dillian Whyte, the first fight. That is his wheelhouse. And when he faces guys like an Ajit Caballero who can move all night, at a reasonably good pace and keep it up, that he can be in trouble. And Usyk is a better version of Ajit Kabayel, that's for sure. So if this was to ever happen, yeah, it wouldn't end well for Derek Chisora, I'd imagine. But he says here, I like Don, this is of Don Charles, but it was time for a change. In the Takam fight, he was on the other side and I could hear him shouting instructions, and Tony told me it was a good move. He is making my feet move fast, everything move faster. I'm feeling great, benefits and everything is going to work out great. It'll be interesting because Chisora, a lot of miles on the clock. Gashi doesn't think he can learn some new tricks, but we shall soon see. I'm not expecting any miracles, but maybe a few tweaks could do some, pay some dividends, but it remains to be seen. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.